Bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game Changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening, Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. How you doing? Today's Wednesday, May 31st, 150 days into the new year. Just 215 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in downtown Burbank, California. I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Good evening, everybody. How you doing? What a week it's been. Stuart Pierce on Monday, Jordan Maxwell last night, and tonight, Dr. Robert Schoch. A little shock and awe tonight. The Gobekli Tepe special. Good luck with that, everybody. I think that's, did I just hit number 3? Number 3? Gobekli Tepe. Yeah, man. Okay. Lots to do tonight. It's going to be that show. The show that you want is here. Dr. Robert Schoch and the Gobekli Tepe special event. Tomorrow night, another Fader night with John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom live, followed by open lines all night long. That will complete our week here. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Simple enough. Facebook, YouTube, please just go right now. Follow, like, and subscribe. Okay? It's that simple. The Sandbox on Twitter, it's hashtag F2B. And any questions or comments during the show tonight, hashtag F2BQ. Did everybody see Allison's picture she put up in Twitter of her little mini bunker? Bunker part 2. Did you guys see that? She's trying, huh? Pretty nice little setup Allison's got there. And so any questions or comments? I bring it up because Allison's already sent one in. It just came in via text. But she's got the secret Textoso line, and she can do that. All right? If you're watching on the bunker cam, right as we went live, took a shot of coffee, went down the wrong pipe, coughed coffee out of my nose. But that's what you get with the bunker cam. All right. Now, let's not forget, tomorrow night, Thursday, on Fader night, we are going to do our drawing. Tomorrow night. Now, if you want to get in on the drawing, become a member. Go to our website. Go to the membership area. You can go from free to full-on Game Changer and anything in between. Go and become a member right now. Your name's going to go in the hat tomorrow night. We're going to do a drawing. 4 pounds of Fade to Black blend coffee and all of the hardware that you need to brew that perfect cup of joe. An amazing gift courtesy of River Moon Coffee. So that's going to go down tomorrow night, but you got to become a member. So go and do it now. Go to the membership area, become a Fade or Not. And if you are a game changer, you're going to get the autographed hat, you're going to get a T-shirt, you're going to get the full package, and get your name in for the drawing tomorrow night. Okay? Or the other way, if you want to do it, just get onto our podcast, $2 a month. Everything is updated, uploaded, fresh every single day. All right? Over 650 shows archived right there. Now, today is our 666th show. Well, actually, it's more shows than that, but the numbering system is all screwed up. But we've gone in order for the last 550, 600 shows, right? So I'm confused as to how many actual broadcasts are out there. But we've gone, it's like show, I don't know, 620 or something. Accurate numbering system. So today officially is number 666. And we knew it was coming up. But I just didn't want to go there, man. I didn't want to do the I just didn't want to do it. Didn't want to do that kind of show. But it falls on our Gobekli Tepe special with Robert Schoch. So there you go. I don't put much into numbers, and especially that number. It's a cool number. It's a great song by Iron Maiden. And tonight is number 666. Okay, check out all of our sponsors, Life Change Tea, GetTheTea.com, River Moon Coffee, Studio Dome Speakers. All of their banners are over at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Just click the promo codes that you need for discounts and free shipping and all of that stuff is in each one of the banners. Use the promo codes. Do it. Help support the show. That's how the show is done. It's done with sponsors. We've got some great new sponsors next month that are going to kick into gear tomorrow on tomorrow night's show, and we will introduce you to everybody tomorrow night. Okay? Now, coming up, the ECETI Ranch. We will be up there for their next conference, which is the July 4th weekend. And it is their Science, Spirit, and World Transformation Conference. And I've got it up now. It's ECETIEvents.com. Very simple. Okay, let me do this. I did this last night, too, in real time. But it's ECETIEvents.com. Tickets and info right there at ECETIEvents.com. And there you go. Boom, done. You got to love, man, you got to love Twitter. You got to love real-time stuff. Somebody sent me an email the other day. Dude, you spend too much time paying attention to Twitter. And I'm like, well, you know what? That's what built this show. That's what built this show, Twitter. Okay? All right. There you go. And, of course, we have Corey Good's conference coming up August 18th, and that will be up at Mount Shasta. Let's get this show cracking. A lot to do tonight. Happy birthday to Clint Eastwood. Today is 87. Wow. Colin Farrell today is 41. I like Colin Farrell, by the way. I do. That's why he made the list. I like Colin Farrell. He's cool. He's cool. Didn't he play? He played Alexander. Yeah, that's what it was. Pretty good, too. And then in Burgess, anybody know how to say that correctly? Our dead guy's birthday today is, we need a moment of silence, John Bonham. John Henry Bonham. 1948 to 1980, died at the age of 32. He was named the best drummer of all time by Rolling Stone magazine in 2011 and once again in 2016. I don't know why they ran that poll twice. Nothing was going to change. Because any drummer, any singer, any guitar player, bassist, or musician from any style of music anywhere on planet Earth, I don't care what the language, the country, I don't care. They will tell you that Bonham was the best ever. And that will probably never change. Happy birthday, John Henry Bonham. On Led Zeppelin, song remains the same. The drum solo when Robert Plant goes, John Bonham, John Henry Bonham. You never forgot that. John Henry Bonham. Happy birthday. On this day in history, OTD. 1977. It happened. The BBC bans the Sex Pistols and their song, God Save the Queen. And by making that move, thinking they were going to shut down the band, it quickly made them the most famous band in the world. Took like 24 hours. There you go. Nice. So cool. Look at these. Look at these. John Bonham. Wow. That's my man right there. That's my man. Look at Bonham. Yeah, man. John Henry Bonham. Happy birthday, man. When they were in 1980, and they were like on tour, in the middle of a tour, United States, tickets being sold, and I was in high school, and I just remember hearing that. It was unreal. All right, fate or fact. Pope Francis, Pope Francis has never used the internet. That's right. Never used the internet. He says he gets it, though. But he does have 9 Twitter accounts with more than 20 million followers. And that is a fate or fact. Tonight, very special guest, Dr. Robert Schoch. He is here. It is the Gobekli Tepe Shock and Awe special event. Tomorrow night, Fader Night with John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom live, followed by open lines all night long. And Robert was talking to him a few minutes ago, and he goes, "Dude, man, are we gonna do open lines tonight? You know, I want to do open lines." I said, just depends on us. But if you want to do, I think he wants to take phone calls. So here's your chance. You ever wanted to speak to Robert Schoch? I'll open up the phone lines in a little bit. 323-825-5045. All right. It happened today. A court has upheld the life without parole sentence for Ross Ulbricht, the creator and administrator of the Silk Road. That's right. That dark web marketplace. He was convicted of drug trafficking and money laundering. The trial itself, the original trial, it took what felt like minutes, and it fell apart from the very, very beginning. And he ended up getting a sentence, life without parole. He was convicted in February 2015, sentenced 3 months later. A 3-judge panel for the Second Circuit Court of Appeals rejected his appeal of his conviction and sentencing earlier today. Lawyers for Ulbricht, who was known as the Dread Pirate Roberts, on that huge, massive dark web marketplace, argued that the government violated his Fourth Amendment rights, which protect against unreasonable search and seizure. They also argued that his sentence was, draconian. Ulbricht claimed that the investigation into him used illegal searches because surveillance of his IP address occurred without a warrant. I have talked about this many, 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 many times on this show. And the way that it ultimately went down, look, without getting into specifics, when you're dealing with, hidden servers and the Tor network and so forth, getting a warrant to a specific place that you don't even actually know exists, or it's all hidden and stuff, that was a difficult thing for them to do. The way that they did it ultimately in the end, it allowed that search warrant to kind of blanket a lot of secret stuff that was going down. And I'm not going to go into those details, but the judges didn't buy his argument. They found that the surveillance of his home network, Facebook and Gmail accounts, as well as the seizure and search of his personal laptop, which happened at a library, were all backed up by a warrant and were legal under modern readings of the Fourth Amendment. Now, as you may or may not remember, he was at a public library, had his laptop open, and he was signed in as the administrator at that exact moment when he was caught, when he was apprehended. Now, this is what they ended up saying. Now, listen to this. This is the court. The substitution of electronic this is a quote. The substitution of electronic methods of communication for the telephone calls does not alone create a reasonable expectation of privacy in the identities of devices with whom one communicates. That's according to Circuit Judge Gerard E. Lynch. Now, that's what he wrote after the ruling. The court sees no constitutional difference between monitoring a home phone dialing information and an IP address routing data, end quote. Scary. Let me continue. Ulbricht also argued that at least two of the undercover federal agents involved in the investigation, Secret Service Special Agent Sean Bridges and Drug Enforcement DEA Special Agent Carl Force, were found to be corrupt, and they were. Their corruption was crucial to the defense, he argued, because it would reveal the agent's ability to falsify evidence against him and demonstrate their motive to do so, end quote. Yes, they were corrupt. Yes, they admitted it. Yes, they were convicted. Yes. More on this in just a bit. The two agents used their undercover access to exploit the Silk Road site for their own benefit in various ways. Both Bridges and Force pleaded guilty to money laundering and obstruction of justice, while Force also pleaded guilty to extortion in connection with their work on the investigation of the site. The judges likewise dismissed this argument that they were corrupt, and therefore if they're corrupt, there's no telling what else they messed with to get the conviction and collect evidence against Ulbricht. Although the agents' shocking personal corruption disgraced the agencies for which they work, Lynch wrote, courts must also take care that the wrongdoing by the investigators, that it had no bearing on the matter before the court, not be used as a diversion from fairly accessing the prosecution's case. So what the court decided, and this is where I tend to agree, okay? I tend to understand the judge's take on this, which is this. The crimes were committed. Silk Road ran. Drugs and other things. I mean, this is a dark world that was running on Silk Road that quickly spun out of control. And that happened. And Ulbricht collected all of that money. All of those Bitcoins. So the investigation happened later, but it doesn't affect the crimes that were committed and the fact that Silk Road was running and he was the dude. And that's where I have to side with the judges. I don't want to. I have to. The two corrupt men, and they were making money. They were doing all kinds of things, those two special agents. They had their own little crime syndicate going on, but they were caught. Had nothing to do with the crimes committed. Okay? That's like saying, man, you go and you rob a bank and you go in and you're shooting up the place and you escape with the cash, and then you get caught by the police later and they come in and take some of the money. And now you want this whole case thrown out because there were a couple of corrupt cops. That doesn't change the fact that you robbed the bank. You can't get out of it, and you're never going to. The cops will be charged separately. And that's the way that it is, and I have to kind of look at it that way. Right? Now, Ulbricht also argued that his sentence was unreasonable because the creation of Silk Road in 2011 made the illegal narcotics industry safer as he removed drug deals from the streets and applied a feedback system to promote preferred buyers and sellers over those who were deemed untrustworthy. Between 2011 and 2013, $182 million worth of drugs were sold on the site. Now, again, in its innocence, if you look at it that way, the way that Ross has painted the picture, and again, I agree with Ross partially here, that, you know, if you want to buy some weed, instead of going down in some crazy part of town and risk getting robbed or risk getting, ripped off on some bad quality weed or risk getting arrested, right, and transporting drugs in your car, buy your weed on Silk Road. We'll deliver it to you. It's going to be guaranteed. We're going to hold your cash in an escrow account. You get the weed and you say, man, this is the best weed I've ever had. And you rate the dealers and you give them a good rating. Boom, the cash gets released. You get your weed. Nobody gets arrested. And there you go. All right. In its idea, it's good. But what it facilitated after that, because you give an avenue for criminals to run amok, that's exactly what's going to happen here. And it's spun out of control for him. So I understand. And there's a little bit more to this, but we don't officially, well, we do. He was one of the DPRs, the Dread Pirate Rob. He was one of them. It was later claimed that there was more than one, right? And he inherited it, and it was handed down to him, and he took it over, and then he, passed it off and had other administrators. Okay, all right, but the bottom line is he was the Dread Pirate Roberts, and Silk Road was his. Now, moving on. He said this in a letter to the court where he was pleading for leniency. And I'm going to quote here directly from the letter. He says, I created Silk Road. Now, he's admitted to it, right? I created Silk Road because I believed at the time that people should have the right to buy and sell whatever they wanted as long as they weren't hurting anyone else. I've learned from Silk Road that when you give people freedom, you don't know what they'll do with it. Silk Road turned out to be a very naive and costly idea that I deeply regret. Now, again, Ross, I feel your pain. I met your mom. I met her in New York, and I get it. The thing is, with I get the passion. But you can't, after the fact, say, you know what? Robbing that bank was a bad idea. I'm a good guy. I went to college. I'm educated. I was going to be an engineer, and I went down the wrong path. And now I look back and I reflect, and I didn't mean to whip out that gun and point it at people and scare them and fire that shot into the ceiling and then take the money out and drive away in my car. I even spent it on stuff I shouldn't have spent it on. I regret all of it, Judge. Please listen to me. I'm a good guy. You know what? Every criminal, when they get caught, says the exact same thing. They really, really do. And Ross, in this case, I'm just saying, you may be a good guy, but you took the money and you continued to run Silk Road for a long time. And I'll say this, Ross, as much as it pains me, because I look at your videos and I see the home movies and I see the pictures and I understand that you were and still are a cool guy. But the fact is, if you hadn't have gotten caught, you still would be doing it today. and Silk Road would have been, selling murder for hire. I don't know. But that's the truth. You didn't back out. If you had back out and sold it and said, look, man, I'm giving the money back, and turned all the information over to the feds, then you got a leg to stand on. But you didn't. You just got caught. It was a staggering amount of volumes in narcotics deals, everybody, along with the overdose deaths of 6 customers. And we have to look at that. The judges said that justified the life sentence. Lynch went on to write, Ulbrich was classified as a drug kingpin during the trial, allowing for a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years. Prosecutors did not seek a life sentence, but Judge Catherine Forrest chose to send a message to other would-be drug kingpins on the dark web. Although the Court of Appeals expressed concern about Forrest's sentencing decision, it just is legal. And judges have a wide range of movements that they can take. They can go all the way from throwing out the sentence, literally, even though there's a minimum mandatory here, judge could shock everybody, right? And then you have the other side where they can just go past the minimum mandatory and go with a life sentence. And again, I have to say, when you are trying to project this safe way to purchase things, illicit materials, and you're taking the crime off of the streets. All of that sounds great. But you know what? 6 people died of overdoses, that they purchased through. And that is part of, with anything, that's part of a risk that you have to take. Whether it's you're going to manufacture cars, brakes go out on your car that you design and you sell, and somebody dies, that's on you. All right? It's just simply part of doing business. And you ran Silk Road and you're doing something like this, it just comes with it. As harsh as all of this is, and it's I know he's a good guy. I just know it. If you've ever seen the movie Deep Web and some other Ross documentaries that are out there, and you see the passion from his friends and his family and the way that he was raised and the way that he just wanted to be the smartest guy in the room, and he was just massively educated and saw the world, and to see that, for somebody to just take a wrong turn somewhere and do this with his life, it saddens me. It saddens me. But any judge will tell you, criminals come and go in their court, and they see everything all the time, and they see all types of cases. But the one thing that they hear over and over again is, you know what? I'm a good guy. I didn't mean to participate in this crime. My buddy here was, that guy, they were but me, judge, I'm a good guy. Well, the judge is going to say, look, man, you didn't pick up the phone and call the police on your friends. You didn't, you participated and you collected the money and you drove the getaway car, whatever it is. You did all of that. The fact is, you're saying this to me now because you got caught. And it kills me to say that. Ross Ulbricht today, his sentence was upheld. There you go. It's the way it is. This is Fade to Black. More on that in a little bit after we talk with Dr. Robert Schoch. He's coming up after this short break. It is the Shock and All Gobekli Tepe special event. You wanted it? Okay, that's 4. Gobekli Tepe. Gobekli Tepe. I'll see you in 2 minutes.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Gobekli Tepe.
Hi, folks. Let's wind the clocks back 60 years. Food was different. Food provided health and nutrition, and using supplements was minimal. Unfortunately, now we have chemicals, GMOs, herbicides, and pesticides that can be quite lethal in the name of our food supply and, of course, the ever-loving dollar. Supplementing our diets can be very important to stay healthy. Cleansing from daily intruders to the body might be critical. Live strong and take charge. Log on to getthetea.com. Our herbal tea is a great way to cleanse from intruders. Our supplements is a great way to maintain and improve your health. When your health is not up to par, go to getthetea.com. No GMOs, no fillers, and organic, and very helpful in keeping you at the top of your game. Life is too short to feel, you know what I mean. Stay in the game, at the top of your game with getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Again, getthetea.com.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA. The Planet.
Hi, this is Chase Kletsky with Fate Magazine Radio, and you're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station, where the Fader-Knots rock.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Tonight we have with us very special guest, Dr. Robert Schoch. That's right, a little shock and awe with our Gobekli Tepe special events. Tomorrow night's another Fader night with John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom Live, followed by open lines, and we'll get to some open lines tonight too as well. Dr. Robert M. Schoch, he is a full-time faculty member at the College of General Studies at Boston University since 1984, earned his Ph.D. in 1983 in geology and geophysics at Yale. He also holds an MS and an MPhil in geology and geophysics from Yale, as well as degrees in anthropology, a BA, geology, a BS from George Washington University. I don't know how he got all this done. He isn't but 29 years old. And in 2014, Dr. Schoch was awarded the title of Honorary Professor of the Nikola Vaptsarov Naval Academy in Varna, Bulgaria. I want a full explanation on that in just a minute. In the early 1990s, Dr. Schoch stunned the world with his revolutionary research that recast the date of the Great Sphinx of Egypt to a period thousands of years earlier than its standard attribution. In demonstrating that, the monument has been heavily eroded by water, despite the fact that its location on the edge of the Sahara has endured hyper-arid climatic conditions for the past 5,000 years. Dr. Schoch revealed to the world that mankind's history is greater and older than previously believed. His latest research, put forth in his newest book, Forgotten Civilization, A Role of Solar Outbursts in Our Past and Future, points to the astronomical cause of the demise of civilizations, as well as the scientific and archaeological evidence that supports his conclusions. Of course, tonight, I also want to dedicate this show to his partner in crime, John Anthony West, who is just doing that heroic thing. He's dealing with cancer right now. Robert's website is robertschoch.com, and I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black our good friend, Dr. Robert M. Schoch. Robert, good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you.
And are you back? Are you? Did you get some rest?
I'm back home is what I think you're asking me.
No, I'm referring to your head, because you have been out on the road for the last couple of weeks, and you guys just got back. It's like a band on tour, right?
Exactly. That's a very good analogy. Yeah, we just got back. Katie, my wife, and I just got back less than 24 hours ago. So it's been interesting. We've been traveling a lot this year. Everything from Peru, Bolivia, Easter Island, Malta, India, and then I think, as you know, I filled in for John Anthony West on a tour to Egypt that he was supposed to have led, but obviously with his cancer he couldn't do it.
That's what friends do, you know.
Exactly.
And, I was so vocal about that. You know, in a way, I felt proud, right? But I was like, what do you mean? It's what he was supposed to do.
Exactly. Well, there's no way I couldn't have done it.
Right. You don't get an award for that. That's just what you're supposed to do, right?
Exactly. But it has been. I don't want to complain. I'm not complaining at all. But it's been a busy year so far.
Now, before okay, I think you know this, but I'll just say this in advance: the Fadernauts who love you so much, the Fadernauts, because I've been so vocal about Göbekli Tepe over the last few years. They developed a drinking game. And every time you or I say Göbekli Tepe, you know what they have to do, right? So,
what they have to do, not me.
Yeah, or me, or we would never get through the show for sure. So I'm just going to warn you in advance. So think about that. But anyway, that's how much we are behind you and your research. All of your compadres out there that have been looking into Göbekli Tepe and visiting the site. I have not done it. Rita and I haven't been there yet, and certainly with what's going on in the Middle East, that makes things pretty tough these days.
Yeah,
but
I would not suggest it at the moment, honestly.
Yeah, it's getting pretty hairy out there, and I would really get upset if something happened to Göbekli Tepe too. That's the other thing, because it's very close to the craziness. I wanted to, before we get to Göbekli Tepe, you brought up Easter Island, and you were just there. And I kind of want to talk about it for just a bit, if you don't mind, because
Sure.
Easter Island, which, if you go back to the original Chariots of the Gods and the way that Eric Von Daniken didn't really introduce it to the world, but certainly into popular culture, right? Easter Island has kind of been ignored, and is it because it is so remote and it's difficult to get to? But the significance of Easter Island, how, what, when, and where, is just as dramatic as any other megalithic site on the world. Why do you think Easter? I keep trying to say Göbekli Tepe. I feel sorry for the audience. Why do you think
they drink, right?
Yeah, exactly. Why do you think Easter Island just isn't spoken about, like Giza or Cusco, Peru, other megalithic sites around the world?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One, it's in a very different part of the world. It is isolated. It's not difficult to get to in the modern age because you can fly there from Santiago. But for anyone in, say, North America or Europe, you have to fly to Santiago. You have to fly then to Easter Island. It's expensive. It costs money. When we've gone, and we've always gone usually to Peru, Bolivia, and then gone to Easter Island. But when we fly back, Katie and I, and we live in Boston, Massachusetts, when we fly back, it takes a good 24 hours,
right.
Essentially continuous flying and connecting flights without any, not really stopping anywhere just to get back. And the thing is, it has been, I believe, based on the evidence, sorely underestimated by the classical archaeologists. So the classical archaeologists essentially have a scenario of Easter Island having not been inhabited by any humans until 1,200 to maybe 1,600 years ago, which puts it outside of the range of, looking at really ancient civilizations. They also have the scenario that it was exclusively Polynesian, inhabited by or settled by the Polynesians coming from the west. They have Puput Thor Heyerdahl, who I have great respect for, the late Thor Heyerdahl,
right,
who thought that there was also a South American influence. And I want to point out that he has since been vindicated by various genetic studies, by various botanical studies, looking at plants that got to Easter Island in very ancient times from the South American continent, or from the Americas, I should say, but particularly South America. So there's been a lot of misconception about Easter Island, I would say, on the part of the classical historians and archaeologists, and it's difficult to get to for the average person, even to this day. So it's been one of these sites where you see big moai, Easter Island heads, all over the place. In fact, we were just at, both you and I were at Contact in the Desert.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, one of the big posters at the amphitheater there, they had Easter Island heads on it.
And this is what is crazy. Let me ask you a couple of pretty simple questions. These heads, which now have been revealed that they are absolutely huge, right? We only saw the head part, right? But some of them weigh, 100 tons, 150 tons, 200 tons.
The biggest ones.
The biggest one is 200. I'm sorry, 250 tons. Now,
one of them that's still in the quarry is estimated at 250 tons. But even moving a head around that's 30 or 40 tons is no minor feat.
No.
Especially when you're on a little island and when you go... Have you been to Easter Island?
No, I have not. I lived in Panama, too. That's as close as I got.
You should come with us sometime.
Oh, I would love to.
Katie and I were married there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I did not know. I did not know that. She is so cool, by the way. I do want to say a special shout out to Katie, but there are some really cool shots of you and I at Contact. And there's one shot of right after the panel where Katie, somebody had taken some behind the scenes stuff. And there's a shot of Katie smiling and shaking my hand. I just want to tell Katie right now, it is the coolest picture ever, and I will send it to you guys.
Yeah, please send it to us because I haven't seen that. Wonderful.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. But I wanted to say this really quick. I didn't know that you were that tall, and it completely caught me by surprise. But what was it like? Because at Contact, we have thousands of people there, and then on that Monday when you and I bumped into each other when the place was empty, right?
Oh, that was strange.
Wasn't it strange? And we took pictures of each other, taking pictures of each other.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. But it was empty. Wasn't that kind of a trippy feeling the day before?
Eerie.
Yeah.
Because all these people were there, and then the crowd disperses again. I guess, Monday people have to go do what they have to do.
And what were you doing wandering around alone? that was also pretty weird. Anyway, back to Easter Island. Easter
Island. I was going to say I was getting ready for the next conference, the smaller Cosmic Origins Sedona conference, which is what we just got back from.
Yeah, I just got pictures.
In Sedona, and this ties in with Easter Island now, in Sedona we were looking at petroglyphs. And that ties back to Easter Island because there are major, beautiful petroglyphs on Easter Island besides the big moai, the heads and torsos. And this all ties back to the end of the last ice age and what was happening at the end of the last ice age in terms of my own research on a major solar outburst that ended the last ice age that people were recording what we call plasma configurations in the sky. And you see that on Easter Island in the Rongo script. You see that in the petroglyphs around the world. Back to Easter Island.
Yeah, back to Easter. Are we ever going to be able to decipher the writing there and try to figure out the genealogy behind it?
That's exactly it. And you and I don't believe I've actually talked about this, but the writing is known as the Rongo script. It is a series of what people have called hieroglyphs, that type of thing. But what it actually is, and this is something I give credit where credit is due. Katie really first saw this, and she's the awe of shock and awe. What she noticed is that these hieroglyphs, as people call it, look a lot like, in fact, they're virtually identical to many of the petroglyphs that Dr. Anthony Perrott has been studying around the world from the end of the last ice age, which he pieced together initially, were what people were seeing in the sky during a major solar outburst. Because when you have a major solar outburst, you get things in the sky that look like sort of the aurora borealis,
right,
but much more specific, much more diagnostic, because you're talking very high energies, essentially charged particles, electrons, protons, etc., entering the magnetosphere, entering the upper atmosphere, driving down to Earth. And this is what caused the end of the last ice age, the solar outbursts and the phenomena associated with it. The petroglyphs from 9700 BC and thereabouts, Göbekli Tepe time, record this around the world in over 130 countries, including on Easter Island. And the Rongo script, and this is what Katie put together, records the same thing, is derived from the same event. So Easter Island is super important for the bigger picture. It has been sorely underestimated,
right,
in my opinion, by many people, not just the classical archaeologists. And I was mentioning before that the classical archaeologists have dated Easter Island to a very recent period, well within the last 2,000 years. I'm convinced that some of these heads, some of these torsos, they have, I'm a geologist, as you know,
right,
and they have been covered up, silted over, if you would, or sedimentary deposits have filled in around them, and the evidence does not indicate it's tsunamis or flash, I shouldn't say flash floods, it's too small an island for that, but it's not just debris coming down the hills in huge amounts over short periods of time. It is sedimentary deposits building up over time, which would indicate much older age than has already been estimated or has been estimated in the past. Plus, Easter Island was bigger when sea levels were lower at the end of the last ice age. So there's a lot going on when it comes to that island.
Are you ready to come out of the closet again? And
I did that several times, didn't I?
Yes, you did. We counted 5.
Desert.
We counted 5, and when the heads were originally standing, I need to ask you, especially as a geologist, were they just sitting flat on the ground?
Some of them were sitting flat on the ground around what's the crater, where a number of them were carved. Then others were put on ahus, which are basically ceremonial, we could use that term, platforms around the perimeter of the island. I do want to point out, because a lot of people have a misconception that the heads look out to the ocean. They actually look into the island. In fact, they probably look in and up toward a point in space above the center of the island, more or less, actually looking at the sky, looking for what will come from the sky. And the Easter Islanders traditionally say that it's eyes gazing toward the sky. But they were set on the platforms in historic times, that is, since Easter Island was discovered or rediscovered, I like to say, by the Europeans in 1722. Most of the moai on the platforms, on the ahu, were knocked over or were brought down. Those near the crater are still standing, but that's understandable because most of them are buried up to their shoulders or chins in sediment.
Now, this is where I want you to give me your honest dating here. For something to go up to its shoulder, that obviously takes time.
It takes time, and some of these, we're talking, you have to understand these statues are big. So we have many, many meters, I want to say, in some cases, let's do feet, 5 meters, 18 feet, somewhere in that range of sediment built up, some cases even more. This takes a lot of time. This is just one line of evidence that is convincing me that Easter Island goes back to a much, much earlier period.
Well, I need a date. I'm not going to let you off that easy. What are you thinking?
A date? Oh, you want a date?
I do. I want a date from Robert Schoch.
Since we have the Rongo script and the petroglyphs, which apparently point back to the end of the last ice age. The end of the last ice age is 9,700 BC. So we're talking potentially, about 12,000 years ago, maybe for the earliest colonization, or at least people being on Easter Island. So I'm talking an order of magnitude greater than conventional archaeologists would suggest.
And
that's pretty radical. You realize that?
And
I guess coming out again.
Yeah, you just came out, and before boats, right? If we go with historians, right?
Well, we go with historians, but I'm convinced that these guys were not getting around by falling into the ocean and grabbing onto a log and just, being thrown around by the breeze. I think they had boats earlier on that has been estimated. There's a lot of suggestions that. Okay, bottom line, let me say it this way, and you know where I'm coming from, but maybe not all the listeners. There was a cycle of sophisticated civilization. I use the term cycle of civilization before the end of the last ice age, before the catastrophes, the natural catastrophes that ended the last ice age in 9,700 BC. And these were sophisticated people. Yes, there were probably primitives too, but we have primitives, quote unquote, nowadays.
Sure.
Both in and out of the technological world. But they were sophisticated. There were sophisticated people. If they're building Göbekli Tepe, which I think we'll get to, I have no doubt that they could also have the technology to build very seaworthy boats.
Robert, if you hadn't met John Anthony West and been exposed to Bauval and Hancock and the group, right?
Yeah.
If you hadn't been exposed to them and you hadn't met John Anthony West, would you have come to the same conclusions on your own?
Well, the thing is, I probably wouldn't have been studying these subjects. I mean, that's the honest truth. I wouldn't have been studying all this. I wouldn't have gotten into this. Well, I was always interested in it since... Yeah, I remember going to an exhibition of Tutankhamun in Washington, D.C., which I think I was 4 years old at the time. I don't remember a lot of it, but I remember it. And my grandmother was a theosophist, and she introduced me to various ancient cultures. And so I had interest in all this. But would I have been actually pursuing it the way I am now, or just reading about it a little bit on the side while doing other things? The latter is probably more likely, because I had a career before John Anthony West. And I don't say that disrespectfully, but I was a geologist. I still am a geologist. And I had a specialty in Eocene fossil mammals and stratigraphy and erosional features that you can apply to many things besides the Sphinx. And I probably would have had a very different career without John Anthony West.
Yeah.
He and I have talked about this in the past. And I don't know, sometimes I think it's great that I met him. Sometimes I say, what did I get myself into?
I know, right? Well, you wouldn't be on this show, and we wouldn't have had so much fun at Contact in the Desert.
Yeah, exactly. I suspect that if I had not met John Anthony West in answer to your question, I would never have been at Contact in the Desert. I'd never know you. I'd never be speaking on your show or other radio shows or television shows about stuff like this. I would have been probably an academic
bored
geologist,
you'd be bored.
Same specialty, the classic academic thing. You get more and more specialized, and you're really successful when you write these obscure scientific papers that only 6 other people can read, and only 3 of them really want to read
or care about. Now it's and this is what I think is so significant here. I know that you're not the only professional academic that has an open mind to these subjects, and they are all exposed to the same characters out there. Why isn't there more of you pushing this rock uphill?
Why isn't there more of me? Because I'm crazy enough to actually do this, I guess, and risk vilification by my academic peers who, how should I say, most people in academia are not risk takers, if you would.
Right.
They're not going to go out on a limb. The way to have a nice, safe career, and I've been told this bluntly by some of my fellow colleagues, especially in my earlier days when, elder academics, elder professors were trying to mentor, that type of thing.
Right.
And that's, you go with the status quo, you make a little bit of, I won't even call it discoveries, you just work within the paradigm and you extend it a little bit and you confirm what everyone else already knows, but that's important, and you make a few little minor tweaks and everything's great, and you write these academic papers and you get promoted and you get your raises, and then you eventually die.
Boring.
Somehow it could be a little boring. I mean, academia is a little boring. Then you get guys, and I hate to keep harping on him, and I'm not trying to compare myself to him, but he's a good analogy. Some people have said this about me. You get guys like Galileo who buck the status quo. I can't talk, but buck the status quo. He went out on limbs. He said a bunch of other guys were wrong with their Aristotelian mechanics, and he had a better way of looking at things. He said a bunch of guys were wrong with their Ptolemaic universe where the Earth went around the sun, and he said this. No, I'm sorry. What did I say? Where the sun goes around the Earth. I'm ahead of myself. And he said the Earth goes around the sun. And what did he get for it? He got fame. He got infamy. And ultimately, he was put under house arrest.
For the rest of his life.
For the rest of his life. And as I understand it, the only reason he wasn't executed, to be blunt, is because the Pope, before he was Pope, had been a personal friend of Galileo's.
And that's it. And that's really the truth here.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. So, I mean, house arrest was actually a good thing in the sense that's probably much better than being burnt at the stake as Bruno was.
Yeah, I often wonder how many academics are out there. They're looking at they probably have one of Hancock's books at home, right? They've seen your video with Jaws and Charlton
Hopefully
Heston.
They have my book at home, and they've read that.
But and they know that the evidence is there, and they probably enjoy it, but they're never going to stick their neck out. It's fascinating to me.
They're not going to stick their neck out, and I can use a different analogy. I'll give you a real example. And this is not quite the same thing as what we're talking about. Actually, I've had some academics say to me bluntly, and they always couch it in weird terms, usually they're ones that are more sociology historians, that type of thing. But I can think of several who have said to me in the back halls that I'm right, or at least they think I'm right, etc. But they're not about to say that publicly. So I've gotten that. And I was going to say the whole phenomena of parapsychology and psychic phenomena, I'm switching subjects just a little bit to make a point. With that topic, which is just as controversial, if not more controversial, among some people, I have literally had people who will poo-poo that and put things down and put me down in meetings among other faculty members. Then the next thing you know, the 2 days later, they happen to run into me quietly in a back hall and no one is there, and they'll tell me about their personal experiences firsthand. But of course, this doesn't, quote, count for anything, and they would deny it if anyone ever mentioned it publicly.
Yeah, that's fascinating. They would come up. We got to take a break right here, Robert. But, for them to come up and go, you know what, man, my grandmother came and spoke to me in my bedroom after she died.
Exactly. Had stuff just like that.
Exactly. Our guest tonight, Dr. Robert Schoch. It's our Gobekli Tepe Shock and Awe special. This is Fade to Black. More with Robert right after this break. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA Digital Broadcast Station.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers. We're of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
What's up, Fadernauts? Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring 2 Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hardshell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The 2 full-range boomboxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129, and use the promo code JCRTWS, and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Gobekli Tepe.
I'm getting older and noticing that my body just doesn't work as well as it used to. So I like to keep fit as possible by hitting the gym a few times a week. Recently, I started having a nagging bicep pain, and it got so bad I couldn't even lift the weights. When I was complaining about it to a friend, he told me about Angioprim. He said chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in veins and arteries that may cause blockages. You know, after just 1 week of taking Angioprim, the pain was gone, and now I'm back in the gym full strength. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. So to learn more, go to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com, or talk to a trained consultant. Call Angioprim toll free at 877-882-7221. You'll feel better with more energy. Call 877-882-7221 or go to the website angioprim.com.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
Welcome back. Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Dr. Robert M. Schoch. A little shock and awe in Gobekli Tepe tonight. And let's get straight back to it. Robert, we participated in one of the most spectacular panels that I have been involved with in recent memory. It was just awesome, and the brain power that was on that panel was extraordinary. And I took a poll that night. I started off the panel to see where everybody's head. Gobekli Tepe won. Okay, so let's just go with that. And I need to clarify or get something cleared up here. Every time I discuss Gobekli Tepe on the show and we discuss dating, I get a flood of email that says Gobekli Tepe is 5,000 years old. It's 6,000 years old. It's not. It's at most. It's I get all of this, and then I have other researchers out there that are pushing this date back to even 12,000 BC, 12,500 BC. Today, where are you on the dating of Gobekli Tepe?
Well, okay, so this is a very, very good point, because Gobekli Tepe is not a single isolated little teeny spot of a site that has one specific date to it. Göbekli Tepe is actually a huge complex, most of which has not been uncovered. As I think most of you and most of your listeners know, it is composed primarily of rings of stone circles, if you would, sort of Stonehenge-like, but much more ornately carved. I mean, ornately carved. Stonehenge is not ornately carved at all. It's essentially not carved. They're just big chunky stones at Stonehenge. So the main rings of Göbekli Tepe, the main enclosures, are what most people are thinking about. I am absolutely convinced, based on the evidence, based on the stratigraphy, based on the radiocarbon dating, based on several different stages, what I'll call stages of construction, and dates that go with those based on radiocarbon and other analysis, including various isotope analysis of the environmental conditions when they were formed, that Göbekli Tepe straddles the end of the last ice age. The end of the last ice age is specifically 9700 BC. So it straddles that. And when I say that it straddles that, parts of it are older than 9700 BC, but let's just use for sake of argument 10,000 BC, just because it's easier to remember.
Right.
So 10,000 BC is 12,000 years ago. I am confident that parts of Göbekli Tepe that are just being uncovered or which Klaus Schmidt, who is now deceased, began to uncover essentially higher up on the hill, if you would. I mean, literally, I'm talking physically. Probably go back at least a couple of thousand years earlier than that. So we're talking maybe 14,000 plus years ago. He himself thought this was the case. As I understood him when he was speculating about. So that goes back to maybe 12,000 BC. Other portions of Göbekli Tepe are younger because after the collapse of the culture, after the collapse of the civilization at the end of the last ice age, people came back there. They tried to rebuild parts of it before they covered it over entirely. So you see these smaller little enclosures that were later. So the entire site has representation, if you would, in time over approximately up to maybe 4,000 years that we're aware of, straddling on both sides 9700 BC, that pivotal date for the end of the last ice age.
And that's very critically important, and we're going to come back to that. It needs to be addressed. But there's another point that I need to make clear, not only to this audience, but to future listeners of this show in the archives. Just because it is in Turkey, modern-day Turkey today, does not make it Turkish.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I need to make that clear.
This is a real problem with modern boundaries and people thinking about whether something's this or that ethnic group, because modern boundaries for countries change. I mean, what are you going to say? Well, if the Turkish-Syrian boundary, because it's very close to the Syrian border, when that changes, it becomes Turkish, and then it's not Turkish, or Syrian, or not Syrian, etc. And a lot of these modern groups, I can use Egypt as another classic example. They were invaded, they were taken over by ethnic groups relatively recently. Egypt in the 7th century or so by Arabs.
Right.
I mean, but they're not native. They're not the native Egyptians. The same in Turkey. And you have, of course, the much older ethnic elements there. More in terms of physical geography, because I come from a geology, physical geography, anthropology, ethnography background. Göbekli Tepe is in Mesopotamia. It's in northern Mesopotamia, without putting any concept of who the ethnicities are. It's in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
So now we are dealing with, as we go back, the oldest part of that region. You could call it the Armenian Highlands.
Yes, because the Armenians were there historically for a very, very long period of time. And this is something I think you're getting into. It's been claimed to be Armenian.
Right.
I have no problem with that, honestly.
Yeah,
but when you're talking 12,000 years ago, I mean, who is to say how were they thinking of themselves? I don't really know, except in terms of what they left us, in terms of sculptures and carvings and the structures that are oriented to the stars.
And so, if you're going to come out of the closet for number 6 here, or number 7,
okay,
and you were going to discuss an ancient civilization that is responsible for Göbekli Tepe and Urfa, man. We can even go there.
You're reading my mind, or vice versa. Urfa, man, is incredible, and he looks ultra modern in many ways, with some kind of maybe close-fitting suit, or whatever that collar is around his head, and he's beautifully carved. He's got, interestingly, the hands down into the navel region, or sort of.
You can say groin. You can.
The groin. Well, no, I was actually going to make another point. Groin or navel region,
right.
But it's very similar to something we talked about before the break. That is the statues of Easter Island.
Yes,
and. Amazingly enough, Katie and I have been finding a lot of similarities, and other people have noted this also, between Göbekli Tepe and that very early period and things on Easter Island. Iconographic similarities, which, of course, by conventional archaeological historical standards is crazy. One's in the middle of the Pacific, remote and isolated. The other is in modern southeastern Turkey.
And when you look at going back to Easter Island, and you look at their script, their language, it's similar to what is in Pakistan, which is like 10,000 miles away.
Similar to Pakistan and the Indus Valley script, but this again comes to my point, which is that these are from a common source. And I believe they're a common source. And I was mentioning before the break the petroglyphs that Dr. Anthony Peratt of Los Alamos has noted around the world with diagnostic shapes. They look sort of like stick figure men, some of them look like bird men or bird-headed men. These are motifs you see around the world at this very ancient time, which derived, based again on working this all out, from what people would see literally in the sky, what are known as electrical discharges or plasma configurations at the end of the last ice age, when there was this huge solar outburst or series of solar outbursts that ended the last ice age.
And occurring all around the world, too, as well. I mean...
Exactly, because Peratt and his team, his group, have actually found these in over 130 different countries around the world, engraved on rock, scratched on stone, what are known as petroglyphs. We now have them on the Rongo script, as my awe-inspired wife, Katie, to get back to the shock and awe, first pointed out. No, and this is an important discovery, or this is an important set of data, and it all points to one conclusion, that we had this early round of civilization, this early cycle of civilization, best represented by Göbekli Tepe, but let's not forget about the Great Sphinx in Egypt, where it all started, with my work redating the Sphinx, and with John Anthony West pulling me to Egypt to get me to look at it geologically. All of this points to this early civilization that was decimated in 9700 BC. And Göbekli Tepe, because I want to get back to Göbekli Tepe, is really pivotal, because we see evidence of the decimation, of the catastrophe. We have pillars that were knocked over and reassembled, and based on the radiocarbon dating, I am convinced that this was happening right at the end of the last ice age, that all the data lines up to 9700 BC, that the Göbekli Tepe people, there was a generation there that actually experienced this destructive force of nature, this solar outburst and all the ramifications at Göbekli Tepe.
And it appears to be graphically represented there, too, as well. And I think that they were trying to send a message. Do you think that they deliberately buried it to preserve that message for the future?
I think they may well have, because what we see is not simply that they buried it in sort of escapism,
right.
But there were pillars that were knocked over. They were reassembled hastily. They were put back into position, back into orientation. They hastily built rough stone walls to sort of protect it, to keep the pillars standing upright. Maybe as they were trying to, as a last-ditch effort, trying to hold it together. Ultimately, perhaps things got so bad, they said, well, we've just got to preserve it, and they filled it in intentionally. And there's no question that they filled it in intentionally, that this was purposeful. Even the classical archaeologists agree to that. They disagree as to why. For the classical archaeologists, and Klaus Schmidt can't really speak to it anymore. I don't believe he was as extreme as some of the classical archaeologists who essentially said they built it for, and I'll use the term that we were told in Easter Island for the Moai, they built it for, quote, busy work, unquote, and then filled it in for busy work, just to keep people
distracted.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, the evidence doesn't indicate that. When I look at it as geologists, this was not, they didn't just build one set of stone circles and then fill it in, and as soon as they had finished it, and then build another one and filled it in. That's not the case at all. You can actually look at some of the stones. Some of the stones were weathered well before the whole thing was covered over. I mean, weathered fairly intensely. Other ones were reworked, re-engraved to a certain extent. Even at the end of his career, before he died prematurely, Klaus Schmidt was pointing this out. So this was a very active site, but site that was hit by the catastrophe of 9700 BC, and then they were scuttling to rebuild it quickly or to get things back into position before, I don't want to say they gave up, but they realized it was overwhelming and they covered it over purposefully to either preserve it for us or for future generations, or maybe they thought they were going to go back to it and uncover it again, but never got to it.
I think we got away from the question that I wanted to, kind of pin you against the wall on, which is, who do you think built it? I mean, what ancient civilization was responsible? Yeah.
Oh, I know who built it. No, I was joking about that. I don't know who built it. I actually have very little clue, and I think no one really has any clue. Yeah, people will tell you this or that, but there's something in science, or at least certain aspects of science, when someone is too definitive and certain, you know that they really don't have a clue. They're just saying that.
Right.
No, I'm serious about that.
I'm serious too.
We don't really know who built it. We don't know if they migrated from elsewhere and then were working there. If they migrated from elsewhere, I believe they arrived several thousand years earlier than the end of the last ice age. What we see at the very end is, I don't want to say, well, it's a culmination before the catastrophe. It certainly took time to build up to that. We see that at Göbekli Tepe, and it's an enormous site, and there's a lot of other sites around there that have either we're just barely aware of, just scratched the surface on, or totally unexcavated. So we really don't know, and I think it's at this point premature to speculate who they were. And what does that question mean? Who?
Well, it could have been the Kardashians if you think about it. See,
say again?
Yeah, and there's another point here I would love to hear your answer on. certainly you've been vindicated to a point because of your dating of the Sphinx, going back that far, and that there couldn't have been a culture that sophisticated back then. And then Göbekli Tepe surfaces, and it says to the world that they had agriculture, they had community, they had some sort of government. Maybe they even had a religion. They certainly had artisans. They knew how to quarry. They knew how to carve and move, and they had organizations. So there was a sophisticated culture back then when there wasn't supposed to be.
I would call it civilization. I have no problem calling it true civilization. It's not our civilization as we have today, but it had all those attributes that you're naming.
And and probably the most important thing of all is you had to have a leader, an organization that was sophisticated enough to convince the good people of Potbelly Hill, Potbelly Hill,
which is the name Göbekli Tepe essentially translates to, or navel. It implies a navel, it implies a birth site, and of course, one of the names for Easter Island is the navel of the world.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? But they had
had astronomy. They had very sophisticated astronomy,
and they convinced the people there that building that was a good idea. Instead of, protecting the family, going out and getting food, hunter-gatherer stuff, that we need to do this. And they did it over a couple of thousand years. It was a major, major undertaking.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, and before we go too far with this, there's a couple of points I'd like to make. We don't know the extent of, I'll call it the Göbekli Tepe people, the Göbekli Tepe culture. We have Urfaman, this life-size statue, which is magnificent. It would be, I think, some certain sculptures, well-known sculptures made today, would be considered an incredible potential masterpiece of modern art.
No doubt.
And that was not found at Göbekli Tepe. It's called Urfaman because it was found in the modern city of Urfa. But the modern city of Urfa is not a modern city. Wherever they dig, when they build new roads or new underground parking garages, etc., they often find the stratigraphic layer with human artifacts and remains, etc., that goes back to Göbekli Tepe time. So what is under Urfa? But this is a city of over 500,000 people. It's a holy site. Abraham, the patriarch Abraham, supposedly, and I don't doubt it, but supposedly lived there. You can see the pools of Abraham. You can see the Abraham's cave where it's said that he lived when he was young for protection. So there's all this tradition. It's a holy site for the Abrahamic religions. And Göbekli Tepe, based on real physical evidence, I will say is perhaps one of the oldest inhabited sites on Earth, going back to Göbekli Tepe times.
Now, we have.
My point is, with Göbekli Tepe, we have such a small sampling of what was potentially a large population and the sophisticated culture, this sophisticated civilization.
And this needs to be just shouted from the hilltops, But Robert, we're going to head to a break. I want you to address something that I find uber critical. Back to Urfaman, dude has 6 fingers. Now, with nobody's that dumb, right, to make a mistake like that. What is going on there?
Does he have 6 fingers? I think it actually depends on how you count them.
I see 5 fingers and missing thumbs.
Yeah, okay. This is very interesting because that's something you see on Easter Island also, and what look like fingers and lack of thumbs. And It's a strange phenomenon. Katie and I have talked about this a lot.
Yeah, you don't make a mistake like that when you're carving something.
Mistakes. I don't think there are mistakes. And when you look at some of the other iconography around the world from this remote time, you do get what seem to be extra fingers. And yeah, I'm not sure what you want me to say. I'm not going to tell you they're all aliens.
Well, no, you already did that at.
And there may well be a genetic condition. I'll throw out one thing. It may be a genetic condition that perhaps it was prominent among the more elite. I don't know. I'm speculating at this point because we, to this day, do have people with non-opposable thumbs, extra digits, what's known as triphalangeal thumbs. Basically, they're more like fingers than thumbs. And we do have that to this day.
Yeah, and it needs. I just want to make sure I'm not the only one noticing something as significant as this.
No, you're not. And
it takes a lot of time to carve something like this back then. A lot of energy.
And that's the thing about both that with the hands of Urfaman and all the pillars in the carvings, the sculptures that have come out, Göbekli Tepe, there's things known as the totem pole. There are a number of small carvings. Small, when I say small, a lot of them are still a couple of feet tall, and when you're carving solid stone, those are not. They're small compared to the big pillars, but they're still very heavy, very massive, that type of thing. And you don't do this just willy-nilly to... it's not graffiti or something like that. It's very purposeful.
Yeah, we need to take a break right here. I want to set this up for when we come back. The other part of Göbekli Tepe for me is the astro side, the cosmic side of it, which
that's very important.
It is very important, and it shouldn't have been right at 10,000 BC. That is certainly. Is something that is important. But when we come back, when you first stepped up to Göbekli Tepe, did it hit you that way? And I want you to hold the answer because we're going to take a break right here. I can only imagine as you were going up the hill and you see it for the first time, did it hit you as a religious thing? Did it hit you with another idea that may be outside of the box? We'll discuss that when we come back. Our guest tonight, Dr. Robert M. Schoch. A little shock and awe on Fade to Black. We'll be right back.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
End time is not what you thought. In their new book, 122436, authors Mike and Cheryl Gilmore bring forth a startling new idea on the beginning of humankind, how life begins on Earth, and when our Creator concludes this age. In the book, 122436, three small groups of individuals, separated by thousands of miles, discover together the answers to the beginning of our universe and all the life it contains. Mike Gilmore is the author of 5 Levels of Power novels and the Sled Investigation series. Cheryl Gilmore is current state director in South Carolina for MUFON and brings a lifetime of experience with UFOs and related fields. As a team, their new book about life in the near future on Earth sets aside most people's religious and scientific beliefs. Available exclusively on Amazon in softback for $8.99 or the ebook price for only $2.99. Remember, Amazon softback $8.99, ebook only $2.99. 122436. Get your copy today.
Hey there, quick question for you. Would you be okay with more energy, more endurance, thicker, healthier hair, a better mood, reduced appearance of wrinkles, improved sleep, improved blood pressure and cholesterol profiles, improved vision, improved memory? Okay then. Well now, have you heard of Nature's Youth RSF? It's from the anti-aging experts at nature'syouth.com. Nature'syouth.com. See, at Nature's Youth, They understand exactly what it means to provide top-quality health products. And Nature's Youth customers not only improve their health, they know they're also providing their body with the right nourishment to maintain that peak performance and fight the aging process. If health, wellness, and nutrition are what you desire, choose Nature's Youth RSF. I did. You see, you're going to get older. It's just up to you how you feel when you get there. Get started today. Nature's Youth RSF. Simple to use, simple to order. Go to nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. Our guest tonight, Robert M. Schoch, the Gobekli Tepe Shock and Awe Special. And so check it out, Robert. I think the latest count is 44 Gobekli Tepes tonight.
Really? Well, I think we're going to add to that.
Yes. Somebody just said 45. Now,
so wait, before we get to that, can I interject something else?
Sure.
Because while we were on the break, Katie said that we could have another revelation here, and this is about her, not me, because you were bringing up the whole issue of fingers.
Yes.
And I was hesitating because I didn't know if she'd want me to mention this, but she said I could. She was actually born with what's known as triphalangeal non-opposing thumbs. It's a it's a condition, and it may be exhibited on the Easter Island Moai and some of these other ancient statues where people have 5 fingers as opposed to 4 fingers and a thumb, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Now, in modern terms, she was, as a young child, they turned 2 of her fingers that were in the thumb position into thumbs, because you can do that now. And they had to take out a phalange to do that. That's why it's called triphalangeal, because if you look at your thumb, it's actually missing one. But this is something that we have been, you can understand, very interested in, and you seem to see on Urfaman and Easter Island Moai, etc. So maybe it was something among the elite at the time, or more common condition, or came from some other area. I won't speculate where, but it's a very interesting phenomenon. So you can see that we're particularly interested and tuned to this. But I was hesitant before the break. I wasn't sure if she'd want me to mention this, but she said no problem with mentioning. And I think it's a really interesting, neat thing.
Well, what you're saying is Katie is an elitist.
She is an elitist, exactly.
Or an alien.
I don't know if you could hear her. She's just saying, or an alien. Some people have said, well, this is an alien phenomenon.
I'm just
but
joking.
I don't want to go there.
Now, before the break, I am just curious because I haven't had the opportunity to walk up on the site. But when you did the first time, Robert, you've seen so many different sites around the world. Did it hit you as a religious site or a museum, or was it something for cosmic origins?
It really hit me. I'll tell you what hit me. The best way to describe it, the way I think of it, and of course I'm an academic, but I mean this sincerely, it hit me as a university of the cosmos. not just a temple or religious site, or, I've said this many times in different contexts, and I think it's true. When archaeologists find something and they don't know what it is, it's either a temple or a tomb. And that's sort of a non-explanation in some cases. In some cases you find a body, but even if you find a body, that doesn't mean it was primarily a tomb. But we won't go there now, and that gets into whether the pyramids are tombs or not. It really struck me as a university. And as I said, I would call it maybe a university of the cosmos. It seems to have astronomical alignments we can talk about. That seems to be recording information like any good university today.
Right.
They were probably learning things there. They were probably exploring the aspects of nature. They were recording. They were, preserving information. They may have had writing. I do want to point that out before I forget, because when you look at the sculptures and you look at the pillars and the carvings on the pillars, there does seem to be a certain amount of symbolic notation and repetition. If we had only a few billboards and signs or, engravings from the sides of buildings 12,000 years from now, and would people argue whether we were literate or not? They might well argue about it and come to the conclusion that we were pre-literate.
And what about on the one pillar, which clearly to me says Zodiac, and it feels that to me. Do you get that the same? I mean, when you have a scorpion,
this is important. So what I get from Göbekli Tepe is more than just Zodiac. And this is based on my analysis of it. The most prominent enclosure, as they call it, is known technically as Enclosure D, because that was the fourth that they lettered, A, B, C, D. It's furthest up on the southern hill of Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe is on the southern slope of essentially a small mountain or large hill. Enclosure D, which is the oldest one of those four enclosures, A, B, C, and D, is absolutely, in my assessment, looking at the data, straddles the end of the last ice age. The central pillars of that are anthropomorphic. They have these humanoid forms. They have arms and hands. The pillars, in particular, one of the pillars, has an incredible belt. I mean, a beautifully carved belt on it. So it's got a belt, it's got the arms, it's got the hands. Tucked under the right arm is a fox or a dog fox. The belt has a fox pelt loincloth. All of this, it looks like a hunter when the hunters, wear fox pelt loincloths, etc. Bottom line, I think a very strong argument can be made that this is Orion. This represents Orion. It doesn't have a head. It just has sort of a T. It's called T-pillar. They call them T-pillars. It actually has many similarities to the Moai, too, which is another issue. But under its right arm, as I said, it has a little dog that could represent the dog star Sirius that travels with Orion. The belt is the belt stars of Orion. The loincloth is the nebula that forms sort of a loincloth in the sky. Orion is the headless hunter. It doesn't have a head, even though we have plenty of other sculptures from Göbekli Tepe showing heads. They could carve a human head if they wanted to.
Right.
And Orion is encircled by the animals of the zodiac. The zodiac, the zoo, if you would, and hunts among them. And this is what you have. You have the other pillars encircling with various, what could be the constellations from 12,000 years ago, which are not the same constellations as we see to this day. And the clincher, I think, is that 10,000 BC or thereabouts, this looked out. This pillar, we know which way this pillar was looking. It's anthropomorphic because we have the position of the hand, so we know what the front and the back are.
Right.
Even if it doesn't have a distinct head, it looked out to the southern sky on the vernal equinox at Orion, and associated with Orion, of course, is Taurus and Pleiades in that region of the sky. So I think we're looking at Orion. Other enclosures going down the southern slope of the hill at Göbekli Tepe also point to Orion, but have been reoriented because of precession, because of the slow movement of the stars relative to the sun. So they were looking at precession and acknowledging and taking precession into account, something that classical historians, classical archaeoastronomers say ancient people did not know about until at most a bit less than 3,000 years ago. A lot of them say that no one knew about precession until the ancient Greeks, just 2,200, 2,300 years ago.
So, based on our true north, and especially when you look at enclosures C and D, also B as well, everything, the two main pillars in the middle are like 3, 4, 5 degrees tilted to the left, based on true north.
Yeah. And instead of being due south, they're slightly to the east, right. Oriented slightly to the east.
Yes. And so would that make up for the precession?
Yes, exactly. And as you go from D to C to B to A, there's more angle there, if you would, because of precessional changes.
Yeah,
I have no doubt whatsoever, and I don't want to knock other people, but there have been other interpretations that they're looking at other parts of the sky. I want to point out that some of those I think are just absolutely bogus. In other cases, if this is a University of the Cosmos, they're going to have some orientations to other points in the sky also. Just like Karnak in Egypt has several different orientations built into it. Right. But I think the major orientation was toward Orion, and Orion is really interesting because we have Orion orientations in a number of very ancient sites now, including, of course, the Giza Plateau, where the Sphinx is located, and this ties in with the whole Orion correlation theory, as it's now called, that my good friend and colleague Robert Bauval came up with a number of years ago. And that also points, when everything is put back into the proper position, should we say, you run the clock back, the orientations correlate best with about 10,000, 10,500 BC, the end of the last ice age, with the Sphinx looking due east at the lion in the sky, that is Leo, on the vernal equinox, and the three major pyramids oriented correctly relative to the Nile, as the Milky Way is situated relative to the belt stars of Orion. So we keep getting this Orion.
Can't escape it,
sites, and at the same time period. There's other sites too. For instance, my colleague Thomas Brophy, a physicist and astronomer, I'll call him that. He has a PhD in physics and has done a lot of astrophysics, etc., working at Nabta has found the same correlations at this early period, same correlations to Orion. So Orion was very important. And I was embarrassed somewhat to find it at Göbekli Tepe, but it makes sense. I was only embarrassed because I didn't want people to think I was just copying other people. But it's really there. And it makes sense, too, though. If you look at the night sky, and this is something we had a chance to do in Sedona when we were just there for that little conference, you could go out into the desert, see the beautiful night sky. Orion is an incredible asterism. More or less, it is really prominent in the sky.
Yeah, it's in your face. It's in your face.
In your face. Yeah. Unlike a lot of constellations where you have to really look for them and, where are they and make them out. And Orion's a really incredible asterism.
Now, I wanted to ask you about one other important thing for me, stands out like a sore thumb, with Göbekli Tepe, and that is what I call the purses, right? There are purses there that are also in ancient Sumer, tied with some of the Anunnaki carvings, but they're there. And they're also in other megalithic sites around the world, this purse. Now, what is the significance of that? And I don't think it's an accident.
I don't think it's an accident, and I don't think they're purses. A lot of times you can have something and then it becomes something else representationally. So, I know that in some cases, in some of the later carvings, and when I say later carvings, I'm still talking, 3,000 years old or more.
Right.
Or even up to 5,000 years or more. In some cases, they've been analogized to guys actually carrying what look like purses, or some people want to call it man bags or whatever.
Right.
One possibility, and I think this ties back, in fact, I know it ties back, I mean, my theory ties back to what was happening at the end of the last ice age. And that is, again, these dramatic events that would have traumatized the people at the time, which originated or were caused by a major solar outburst, solar flares, coronal mass ejections, things being spit off by the sun. What is one of the phenomena that you see on a massive scale when that occurs? It is basically solar arcs, these filaments, if you would, huge filaments that come off the Earth, come off the sun, make huge arcs, then flare out and hit Earth. So one very good possibility, in my assessment, is these are not purses at all. These are diagrammatic representations or derived from solar arcing.
The other, I don't want to sound like a child here, but when
you never do you?
when I see that belt every single time with the H on it and the buckle and the hands coming down, and I see that, all I can think of, and I've been criticized about this, but I'm at the point I don't care, but I see high fashion. I see sophistication. I see a belt buckle, a belt buckle with designs on it, the Hermes H, whatever. But it's there, and it shows me that is a culture that was way beyond what it's supposed to be. That belt is as significant as anything at Göbekli Tepe.
I think when you look at that belt, the buckle, you can actually imagine how this buckle worked, based on analogies with modern belts.
Right.
And it was pretty sophisticated, and it's got symbols on it, that type of thing. But it's probably a combination, in my assessment, of both high fashion, or as one of my students once said, designer belt 10,000 BC, but I also think it's encoding essentially math and science and information into it. To me, that H and that C, etc., is probably symbolic notation. The H actually ties in with plasma shape, very highly stylized. Again, I'm talking about what happened at the end of the last ice age and the sun. I think it ties in, as we were just talking about, with Orion and the belt stars of Orion. So I suspect it is so sophisticated that it is both high fashion, if you would, 10,000 or so BC, but also incorporating real information, real science, if you would, symbolic notation that's referring to things that were happening at the time.
And what do you think? You just mentioned the H. I don't think any of this can be ignored here, but that H is deliberate with the two arcs on the outside.
And you see H's elsewhere at Göbekli Tepe carved into some of the pillars.
And I'm looking at like 5 right here.
Yeah.
And I hate to do it, but I'm just going to mention it really quick. I'll do this for Giorgio. You have those H blocks at Pumapunku.
I know, Pumapunku.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, H are the H symbol, and this is a bit stylized now. Think more if the arms of the H or the two H's were sort of like a C and a backward C, and you also see that at Göbekli Tepe. Joined in the middle, you would start to think more in terms of what you would see in the sky during a major plasma discharge, a solar outburst or solar discharge. And it may go back to that. So again, it may go back to some real natural phenomenon that was incredibly important
it's
them
like,
and this starts to look again like some of the petroglyphs, etc. Some of the what look like stick figure men that you would see.
Well, the H is like in parentheses, and I know that's a modern interpretation, but it is being singled out. It's like they're pointing towards it. There's something to it.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's why I say I think it's more than just a fashion statement. It's more than just design. It's more than just, putting things on the rock to look pretty or dress it up. You don't go through that much trouble if there isn't some serious message here.
Now, do you think, we got enough time to get this in because I want to get to Giza and also some phone calls, but so we've got about 5 minutes here. Do you think the more that I look at, I've studied it till my eyes have bled red, right? It looks to me that there's a possibility that these circles were covered. That with the outer pillars, the way that they all point towards the center, you have the T pillars exposed in the middle, but they have those strange grooves on the top. I think there's a possibility that wood, and there could have been a roof.
Well, no, I would tell you my opinion on that. Having studied it, been there in person a number of times, I suspect that there may have been secondary, in fact, there is evidence for the secondary roofing over covering of it. Initially, my personal opinion is that they were open to the sky. They were used for astronomical, it was observatory. Also, those pillars were very cleverly, I'll put it that way, and in a very sophisticated manner, erected such that they're barely set into the bedrock. It's a very shallow groove that is used to set them into the bedrock.
Right.
And Schmidt said himself that they were using some kind of cement, sophisticated cement, to cement them in. He initially thought that when they were excavating them, ultimately they would find that about a third of the pillar or so, like Stonehenge, was set into the bedrock or set into the ground somehow. When they got down to the bottom, they found that literally just centimeters worth. I mean, very small amount is set into the bedrock, not enough to support it to any, great extent. They were really balanced very finely. I suspect they were vibrating at one point, sort of like tuning forks, which may have added to the overall effects of the site in terms of, raising consciousness levels, making it a very, we'll just call it special place for people to visit. So it was very finely tuned. It was a bit fragile, that type of thing, but very sophisticated. Later, I suspect, maybe when the catastrophe started to hit, at one point they covered it over, put a roof over it. Some of the holes and grooves and whatnot that you see on the tops of the pillars may be secondary. In fact, I suspect they are secondary. They were not original to the pillars. So one thing one has to keep in mind is that this is a site that was actively used over a long period of time, and it was modified along the way. It was parts were rebuilt, as we discussed. At one point, a roof was put over it in my assessment, but that wasn't necessarily the original site. It's interesting because National Geographic has done some reconstructions of it, and their reconstructions are, not to be too critical, but a bit of a hodgepodge, where they show some of the original portions of it plus some of the reconstructions all thrown together, and essentially make it out in a way that may never have existed at one point in time.
Do you think that the investment will be made to complete the dig there and get to all 22, 24, 25, possibly more?
Not in my lifetime or your lifetime. It's very, very, very expensive to do it properly. Plus, there's a war going on right across the border. When you're at Göbekli Tepe, especially at night, you can see the Syrian side. You can see the border. I was there at one point, and you could see the fires as they were. The war was going on in Syria.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a dangerous area from a practical point of view. Right now, they are roofing it over. They've boxed in some of the pillars. They've removed a lot of material to the new museum in Urfa. They're building an incredible museum. They have built an incredible multi-million-dollar museum in Urfa to house artifacts from Göbekli Tepe. They've done reconstruction of one of the enclosures at Göbekli Tepe, and it's not the same as seeing the real thing, but they're doing their best. And the site itself, I've heard now, since we were last there, it's actually been closed down. They're just trying to protect it, and the best way to protect the unexcavated portions are to leave them unexcavated.
Now, we've got 2 minutes for a response here. With it going finally mainstream and went into the mainstream media, I know that you read the press releases that now they are suggesting that the carvings on some of the pillars there are suggesting the impact of some type of solar event. What did you think about that when you read it?
Well, I think the solar event is absolutely correct. What I want to say is that there have also been press releases suggesting a comet event, and you have to distinguish between comet and solar events. In the comet event, there's no suggestion for that. I mean, I've looked at it very carefully. I don't buy the comet interpretation, but the solar event, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And as I said, that's what I started to say when you were asking about, or that's what I said when you asked about the dating of Göbekli Tepe. It's very important that it straddles the end of the last ice age. It straddles the major solar event that brought our ice age to a close.
Let's take a break right here. When we come back, we're going to head a little bit south and west and go straight to Giza. We have to, because our guest tonight is Dr. Robert M. Schoch. Little shock and awe, but we're going to go to Giza. You ready for that, Robert?
I'm ready.
Let's do it, and we'll take some phone calls. This is Fade to Black. We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station. Salt Lake City, Utah. Van Buren, Arkansas.
Okay, nurse, let's get this man to the ER stat.
Right away, doctor.
We see this every day. Heart attack or angina pain due to blocked and clogged arteries. Chelation can remove obstructions or blockages from arteries and help avoid painful and expensive surgery. Now there's Angioprim. It's a liquid oral chelation product that you take with juice. You start to feel the results fast. Angioprim increases blood flow all over the body, and that means more energy and strength to take on the day with less aches and pains. 60 years of research has gone into chelation, and Angioprim is the result. A safe and easy way to unblock your veins and arteries from buildup that slow circulation.
Paging Dr. Jones. Please report to the emergency room right away.
Log on now for a special radio offer from Angioprim. That's angioprim.com/radio. ANGIOPRIM. angioprim.com/radio or call 877-882-7221. That's 877-882-7221.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on the smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
My name's Doug Salamone, and I have a new show for you that will blow your mind. So what kind of show is it? It's a podcast, and it's called In the News. And you can find us at inthenewspodcast.com. We talk about what's new, what's crazy, what's out of this world, and we'll dissect those thoughts, ideas, and events right here on the show. And hear all the news you may have missed or really don't give a crap about, but want to hear anyways. So come on over and meet me at inthenewspodcast.com. That's inthenewspodcast.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Teppy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why Fade to Black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
All right, welcome back, Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Dr. Robert M. Schoch. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. I'm going to open up the phone lines, 323-825-5045. And Robert, I'm going to go back to the first time you were on the show, which was, 4 years ago. It's crazy to think about that. But I hit you with the question that you were reticent to answer. I asked you the second time you were on the show 3 years ago. You kind of answered it. I'm going to ask you again. You spent the night in the King's Chamber, and you said it was just a moving experience, nearly an epiphany. What happened?
Yeah.
What happened?
I'm not going to tell you anything more than that. I mean, everyone, if no, that's even Napoleon didn't talk about
I know, right?
I mean, seriously. There's coming out, and there's coming out. I'm not coming out that far.
You're not coming out that, you're not going to leave the room.
We have to save something for another show for another time. How's that?
One of these nights.
One of these days, they'll say Göbekli Tepe so often, and somehow it will inspire me to go into more detail. But
I can only imagine.
But I will say that not just the Great Pyramid, not just the King's Chamber, and this is something I want to give John Anthony West some credit, because he's the one that has really stressed that. But I agree with him. Not just because intellectually, but from the experience, from experiencing them. When you experience these structures, you have to be emotionally dead, mentally dead, if you would, if you aren't moved by them, if you don't get anything out of them. But to be in the King's Chamber overnight, I mean, that's something. And no, I'm not going to review anything more right now.
Okay, well, fair enough. Do you think that it is something that is occurring between not only the granite, but the weight of the rock, the weight of the structure, its alignment to the stars?
I think it probably has to do with all of those. But a lot of it, I will say this, it may be alignment, it may be concentration of, should we say, forces, but something that's very important is Schumann resonances. If people know what that is, these are low-frequency, long-wave resonances, something that sometimes is referred to as the heartbeat of the earth. It aligns with our natural mental functions, as can be measured with brain waves, that type of thing. And we essentially need these to stay sane. But when you're in a place like the Great Pyramid, it seems to amplify them. And it, at the same time, filters out shorter wavelength, higher frequency. And so you tap into, I'll explain it this way, and this is somewhat metaphorical, but you tap into these lower frequency, longer wavelength resonances. And these are real. These can be measured physically. And it affects your consciousness. It leads to higher states, that type of thing, and allows you to tap into what some people would call the sort of the bigger realm of consciousness, which is independent from physical brains.
Now, when we go back and we look at the first dynasty or Dynasty 0, and we're looking at Mene or Narmer. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, and we look at that time period, allegedly, let's say 3000 BC, 3500 BC, somewhere in that area. Do you think that Mene inherited the Giza Plateau?
Let me put it this way. The answer is yes. The answer is absolutely yes. But what he inherited was, I don't want to say a pile of rubble, but what he inherited was a situation where he had, and the dynastic Egyptians had, much older, probably somewhat ruinous structures that dated back to that earlier cycle before the end of the last ice age, what the Egyptians referred to as Zep Tepe, the first time, the time of the gods, and that ended. And I'm saying this as a geologist, I'm saying this as someone who studied all the data on the Giza Plateau, that ended with the end of the last ice age, 9700 BC, just as we have the catastrophe that was experienced and recorded not by human hands, but by the evidence of the destruction and the pillars being knocked down at Göbekli Tepe. We have the same thing in a somewhat different form on the Giza Plateau. So we have the damaged Sphinx. We have the Sphinx that was heavily eroded at the end of the last ice age by the waters that were beating down, because at the end of the last ice age, you melted all these glaciers, you put all this water into the atmosphere, moisture that came back down is horrendous precipitation, flash floods, and furthermore, the ancient dynastic Egyptians recorded that the Sphinx, or what I call the Proto-Sphinx, was, quote, hit by lightning prior to the time of Khufu, who was the supposed builder of the Great Pyramid, and according to the Egyptologists say classically that the Sphinx hadn't even been carved yet we have the inscriptions that talk about this. They went and they saw the fossilized, that's my term, they said preserved thunderbolt. And recently I've identified what I believe is actually evidence of vitrification on the Giza Plateau, which would have been the result of such a plasma strike at the end of the last ice age.
Now,
so all seems to be coming together.
It does.
That we have this occurring, and we have fields of natural glass, or what's considered natural glass. And when I say natural glass, it doesn't look like nice window pane glass, but things like the Dokle glass, or the Libyan desert glass. Some of those might go back to an earlier round of plasma strikes, but they cover huge fields, in some cases 2,500 square kilometers. This is not just from lightning. It's not meteoritic. There's no evidence of that. It's from being hit by solar outbursts. So Menes inherited, if you would, these much older structures, and the dynastic Egyptians rebuilt them. They recarved the head on the Sphinx. They, I want to say, informally mucked about with them, but they rebuilt them, refurbished them, and used them.
Now, I know, I hope Jaws is listening right now, and his head's going to spin, and he's going to want to yell and pound and take another sip of his chilled vodka and yell at me like he has. Okay, so yes. We love him so much. But I want to suggest this. The more that I look at this, Robert, is there the possibility, is the door slightly open to, that the king's list, the pharaoh's list is wrong? That the timing of that possibly could stretch back to and before Nabta Playa? Is there a possibility of it budding up to?
Okay, when you look at the king's list, as recorded by the ancient Egyptians, whether it's in the walls of Abydos or the Turin Papyrus or some of these other lists, what's interesting is that they list what we now call dynasties, the lists of the pharaohs. And the concept of dynasties is not really used until Manetho and Ptolemaic times.
Which was 300 BC, everybody. Let's make this clear.
250, 300 BC.
Right.
So that's relatively new. But when you look at these lists, they talk about 25,000 years or so worth of pharaohs. They don't have every single name, but they talk about let's just say, for round numbers, 25,000 years worth of pharaohs or followers of Horus, as they call it sometimes, and various, they didn't use the term dynasties, but families, rulers, that goes back, incredible amount of time, well back into the end of the last ice age. Of course, the Egyptologists just dismissed this, but actually, I don't want to speak for John Anthony West, but he and I have certainly talked about this, and he suggested to me more than once that this could indicate that the cycle goes back. So I pointed out, I think before one of the breaks, that 10,000, 10,500, that era, BC, 10,500 BC era, was the age of Leo. The Sphinx looked at Leo in the sky on the vernal equinox. Well, the same thing would have occurred 26,000 years earlier. So is it possible that all of this goes back another precessional cycle? Could some of these structures, maybe the Proto-Sphinx even, go back to not just 10,000 BC roughly, but 36,000 BC. Here, do you want me to come out of the closet again?
Yes, I do. Let's go for number 7.
On the basis of strict geology, I can't absolutely dismiss that or disprove that. I'm not saying that's the case, but is it possible? Is it within the realm of possibilities? I think we have to, be open to we don't just accept all possibilities as probabilities, but we have to look at it and really think about it. And one thing that we also have to take into account is that the Sphinx itself, to this day, when you have Sahara desert conditions or hyper-arid conditions, and you've had that in the past some, as well as more moist periods, when there's arid conditions, as we've had for the last 5,000 years, the Sphinx itself, the body gets covered with sand. The Sphinx enclosure fills up with sand up to its chin, and this is a very important point because that protects it. So that protects it from further weathering, it protects it from further erosion. So I don't want to say there's no limit to how old it could be, but could it be even older than end of the last ice age? Could go further into the ice age by tens of thousands of years? John West is, and I have certainly talked about this. I'm not inclined that way. Maybe, that's
you can't go back in the closet, Robert. Okay, what? So you came out.
I can't go back into the closet?
No, you can't. And see, this is, but you bring up a really good, but you bring up a really good point. At 300 BC, to go and start to archive the history of the dynasties is a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
And for them to do that and to lay it out and try to get the names right and collect all of the information that they had at 300 BC is a huge undertaking, but that doesn't mean that the dating is correct. It's 3,000 years that they're covering. How could they possibly know what is going on at 300 BC?
3,000 years, which is the most recent 3,000 years, and at that time they're even talking about how things could go, that there was more that they didn't cover that goes back even earlier.
And what is okay now? And now that we've firmly established that, and I really mean that, I just don't. It cannot be accurate. It just can't. The names of the dynasties and the pharaohs, okay, that's fine. But to pin it down to just a 3,000-year period, I think is outrageous. It could be 6,000 years. It could be 9,000 years.
Oh yeah, this is part of the problem with the chronologies of the pharaohs and. If you look at modern Egyptology, and when I say modern Egyptology, I'm talking in the last 200 years, there have been incredible disagreements as to when pharaohs lived in terms of absolute dates, more or less how long ago. It's varied all over the place. Some of the early Egyptologists actually placed the pharaohs or the earliest pharaohs back thousands of years earlier than modern Egyptologists do. Modern Egyptologists have tended to compress it into one. Also, we have a situation where just because you have a pharaoh named such and such, that doesn't mean you're necessarily talking about the same person, more or less more than one pharaoh. And we know this from Ramesses, etc. There's a number with the same name, and we know that, but could there be other cases where there was more than one, some of which go back much further?
Yeah, I mean, you have the Greek and Roman calendars, right? 400 BC, 600 BC. But once you go beyond that, it's your guess as good as mine.
Yeah, well, no, some people's guesses might be a little better, but I'm just joking.
But it's really true.
No, but the point is that we really there's a lot of assumptions there, and there are a lot of assertions. And, it actually drives me a little crazy. And I'm going to agree with you on this. When you get these, I'll just say Egyptologists or historians, and they tell you precisely, oh, so-and-so ruled from this year to this year, as if somehow they know for certain.
And they don't. There's just no way. And you know what? Even the Egyptologists disagree, too, as well.
Yeah, they do. It's not internally consistent within the field.
Not at all. Not at all. Now, I want to talk about Nabta Playa. And the reason why Nabta Playa is a very, very, very significant place, time that is not discussed at all. I mean, you really have to dig deep into Egypt history to know anything about Nabta Playa at all. But when Robert Bauval said at the panel, and I know you remember, I freaked out. I did not know this, that Zahi Hawass moved Nabta Playa. Now, for everybody out there, Nabta Playa was a little baby Stonehenge. It was a calendar in the middle of the desert that has been dated to around 8,000 BC when there was a lake there. How can somebody move a site like Nabta Playa for any reason and not go to jail? I mean, seriously. I mean, it's a crime. It's a crime.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And the problem with it, or the issue is, not just that the rocks were moved and moved about, but they were moved without being properly positioned, without getting their proper orientation initially. Because Nabta Playa, the stones there you described as a baby Stonehenge, and that is a good analogy on more than one level. It's a Stonehenge-type circular structure, not unlike Göbekli Tepe 2, but unlike Göbekli Tepe in that we do not have beautifully carved stones. They're just rough, crude stones like Stonehenge in England, but much, much smaller. And the whole point of Nabta Playa was the orientations, the precise orientations of the stones, not any kind of carving on them or reliefs like we have at Göbekli Tepe. So any site, if you have stones that are oriented, it's important to keep those orientations and to record them precisely. And the best way to keep the orientations is not to move the stones. In the case of Nabta Playa, as I understand it, the stones were not recorded properly as to their precise orientations, and then they were moved. They were picked up and they were moved, and a lot of this information was potentially lost. Now, Thomas Brophy, who I mentioned before, has spent a lot of time working on Nabta Playa and combing through photographs and literature and whatnot to reconstruct exactly what was going on. And the results are astounding. Again, you have this Orion correlation, you have things going back to a remote period, and you have essentially the same story with different forms at Nabta Playa.
And again, Nabta Playa shows a sophistication that technically, according to historians, just wasn't supposed to exist.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not an obvious sophistication at Nabta Playa. I do want to say that, because to the average eye, it looks like a bunch of stones in a circle on the ground. The sophistication is in the orientation.
Correct.
And the analysis that's been carried out. Unlike Göbekli Tepe, where you look at it and you see sophistication right away with the sharp cut corners, with the anthropomorphic pillars, with the hands down by the navel, with the belt, the loincloth, the beautiful carvings of animals and abstract forms, or the sophistication you see at Giza for the earliest structures, with, of course, the Sphinx, even though the head has been recarved, but also the Sphinx Temple and the Valley Temple, these huge, well, they're not huge temples, these incredible temples carved out of or constructed from huge limestone blocks, which also go back to the 10,500 BC era, because they're contemporaneous with the original Sphinx.
I want to kind of end the show on this to get your opinion. This kind of ties everything together that we have been talking about tonight. Not only the 10,000 BC end of the last ice age, the civilizations that came before it, but Egypt, by any measure, appeared in the desert an upright and fully functional and badass civilization. Their best stuff is their oldest stuff.
Well, okay, but this you're talking about.
But let me finish the question.
Yeah.
See, I know you're passionate about it.
Oh,
and,
I know.
And then we saw the steady degradation that happened over a 3,000-year period. How is it possible? I want you to answer all of those skeptics out there. How is it possible for an upright civilization to just appear at 3000 BC the way that they want us to swallow it? They want us to just believe that dogma.
Okay. My answer is that Egyptians did not just appear in 3000 BC. What happened is they reappeared in 3000 BC, if you would. So let me explain. We have this ancient civilization we've been talking about before the end of the last ice age. It's incredibly sophisticated. It's building the Sphinx or the Proto-Sphinx in Egypt, carving it out of the bedrock, building these huge temples out of limestone blocks, which date back to that early period. We have Göbekli Tepe, which is incredibly sophisticated. We have Nabta Playa. We have Gunung Padang in Indonesia, which we won't get into today. All of this is decimated at the end of the last ice age, 9700 BC, by huge solar outbursts, solar flares, coronal mass ejections, all this type of thing. And civilization goes into a tailspin. It goes into a dark age, what we are now calling Siddha, the solar-induced dark age. That lasts for a good 6,000 plus years, in Egypt close to 7,000 years, and it's not just a sudden appearance, it's a reemergence, it's a reawakening, just like Europe came out of the Dark Ages in the 14th, 15th century. And all of a sudden you had this incredible Renaissance. We call it the Renaissance. This is what was happening in Egypt in 3000 or so BC. It was a reawakening. It was a reemergence of civilization. It was a Renaissance. And the Egyptians, the ancient dynastic Egyptians, tell us this explicitly. It's just that the Egyptologists never believed it. They talked about Septepi. They talked about the time of the, quote, gods. Of the earlier civilization. They traced everything back to that. But, Egyptologists have always had the opinion that they know best, and they know more about ancient Egypt than the ancient Egyptians knew.
Well, the tweets just went out from the Fadernauts to Zahi directly. Did you really move this to another location? Man, he'll never be a guest on this show. Yeah. I can tell you.
And I did want to say one other thing. People ask, well, how did people survive the solar outburst? Where did they go? One example is Cappadocia. The way to survive was to go underground, and we see this throughout this early period, just following the last ice age, where people were going underground. They were building large structures to protect themselves.
Even here in North America.
Even here in North America, absolutely. All around the globe.
So what's up for you next, my friend?
Oh, I'm writing. I'm working on writing. I'm hoping to basically spend the summer writing, finishing up some new books, that type of thing, including working on one on Göbekli Tepe. I just let something else out of the bag.
Thank you so much.
But one should look for that. In the meantime, Forgotten Civilization, I'm hoping people will take a look at that if they haven't already. Forgotten Civilization, the role of solar outbursts in our past and future, and that talks about the sun and the Rongo and the end of the last ice age, and covers material that we were talking about today. Also, as you know, I have a book out with Robert Bauval called Origins of the Sphinx, which really focuses just on the Sphinx and the age of the Sphinx, which underpins and really is the foundation for so much of the new thinking on how far back civilization goes.
We didn't get into demigods tonight, so we'll save all of that for another show.
We'll save that for another time. Exactly.
Thank you so much, Robert, and give my best to Katie. And again, everybody, it's robertschock.com. And say goodnight and say Göbekli Tepe one last time.
Göbekli Tepe.
You're the best, Robert. Don't ever change, my friend.
It's always fun. It's always great to be on the show.
Thank you so much, Robert. Be safe out there.
You too.
Robert Schock, everybody. Now, his websites are over at jimmychurchradio.com. Very simple. Go and click. All the books are there. I do have the new book here with Robert Bauval, and it specifically gets into the demigods and the origins of the Sphinx. Great book. Go to his website, check everything out. This is Fade to Black. I ignored phone calls. I'll take some next. 323-825-5045 or 323-275-9695. I'll be right back.
Hey, what up, y'all? It's your girl Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter. But listening to Jimmy Church will.
So you went to dinner last night, you had your favorite pasta. Ugh. Or maybe you had a heavy, spicy meal and it left you. Ugh. Get the T.com. Maybe you mowed down a huge steak and your plumbing is all plugged. Ugh. Get the T.com. Our super strength tea will take care of your occasional. Ugh. It's all organic and non-GMO. Get rid of. Ugh. We have so many great supplements, but our super tea is number one. Get the T.com. That's GetTheT.com.
Levels of Power. Fact or fiction? Author Mike Gilmore brings political thrillers aligned with the latest news stories direct from our nation's capital. Immigration and border security. High tension in Southeast Asia. A Supreme Court nomination. Follow Senator Randy Fisher through the halls of power as he confronts the issues that affect our everyday lives. Fast-paced political thrillers. Levels of Power. Discover more at michaelgilmore1.com or amazon.com. Get hooked today.
When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roasted to the dark side of fade to black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Tepe. What's up, Fadernauts? Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring two Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hard shell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The two full-range boomboxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129 and use the promo code JCRTWS and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Go Beckley Tepe.
Erica, Reggie, Gabby, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. Thank you, Robert Schock. Just looking at the tweets here. Best show of the year. Yeah, it was. It's right up there. Right up there. Right up there. Okay, so the Gobekli Tepe count, according to Jason, is 81. I've seen some that said it was over 100. How you guys doing? That was amazing. Just an amazing show. He is just, education is part of it, but he gets it. He gets it. So anyway, I'm going to open up the phone lines, 323-825-5045 or 323-275-9695. What'd you think of the shock and all Gobekli Tepe special event with Dr. Robert M. Schock? Couple of points that I want to drive home here. The Pharaoh's list, the dynastic list that was created at 300 BC. Look, that is a monstrosity of an effort. Even if somebody had to do it today and go through all of the temples and all of the information that was there and try to pin this down and try to collect all of the information, it would be just an enormous task. And I can't imagine having to do that at 300 BC, right in the middle of the Greek period. And the going around to all of the different sites and trying to collect the papyrus and get something accurate. Well, it's there. Now, we have a couple of different lists, but going back to Menes, possibly Narmer, is there a Dynasty Zero? That part of it doesn't matter. My point is, and I will just yell about this, you cannot take that information and then accurately go back and pin down a date of 3000 BC, 3100 BC. It's a lie. And forcing us to accept that as truth and fact is just wrong. I look at that. It could be, and if you think about this, covering a 3,000 year period, if you just start to add or subtract and add years and decades to these dynastic periods, you could stretch that. You could double it. You can go to 6,000 BC without even blinking. And it could go further back than that. And it answers so many different questions if you remove that. My point is, we need to stress this. At 2700 BC, 2650 BC, and for those Egyptologists that are listening to me right now, or the historians that are listening to my voice right now and they want to argue this point, it is improper for you to suggest to us that at 2650 BC, that 300-year period between 3000 BC and 2650 BC, that all of this magic happened. The amazing technology, it just happened. Nabta Playa, and let's be very specific here, that's at 8000 BC. And we're talking about a nomadic life, right, where you are chasing the water and you are struggling for survival. Okay, now, if you want us to accept that suddenly Mene at 3100 BC, Upper and Lower Egypt are united, and suddenly there was a population, there was a culture, and there was a technology, there was a writing, there was a sophistication that went from chasing water in the desert to suddenly constructing this not only Giza, but everything with such sophistication that they knew how to do all of this. It doesn't fit now, and we don't accept it now. I just have a hard time. The other point, Robert and I didn't get a chance to get into this tonight, but I promise I will do it in the future. But I've discussed it before. It's a numbers game. It's purely a numbers game. From 3100, now if you go and look up the numbers that are presented right now, 3100 BC to year zero, that 3,000 years, 500 million people lived and died in Egypt. Now, that's a large number, and it's a number that you go, wow, okay, yeah, they got it done. They had a population. No, that 500 million is over 3,000 years, and the population ramped up. At 3000 BC, there wasn't anybody living there if you listen to them. So when Mene and Upper and Lower Egypt merged, right, whether there was a war or not, we don't know. The Narmer stone says some things. There's only one. It's two-sided. But that the population was very small. Now, either it is the way that Egyptologists are presenting to us, where it was a nomadic lifestyle and there wasn't, armies. There was no chariots and things at 3000 BC. It didn't exist. So how did all of this get done? Suddenly, in the middle of nowhere, we have this upright, beautiful, sophisticated civilization. It couldn't have happened that way. It was much older, and it developed over time. And going back pre-Ice Age, it has to be that way. It cannot be the traditional dogma that we're fed. It cannot. And listening to Robert present it that way, it just makes sense. It makes sense. All right? Okay, man. On my soapbox. But it is just the way that it is. I thank John Anthony West and Robert Paval and of course Hancock and all of the other great researchers that have been looking into this over the years. It's just the way that it is. Zahi Hawass, man, I can't believe that we sent that tweet out to him. He's probably blowing a gasket right now, and I don't mind. I don't mind rocking the boat on this one. He also brought up Thor. And the thing is, when Thor built 2 boats out of papyrus reeds, Ra and Ra 2. And he sailed them from the Mediterranean over to the Caribbean to prove, Ra 2, that there was a transoceanic culture and the possibility that it did happen. He got that baby to Bermuda, man. And it was sinking, but he got it there. It answers so many questions, but you got to move that over to Easter Island too as well, where the same possibilities are there. What historians are trying to tell us is that they had canoes, and like Robert had said, I want to get back to that point, that they were grabbing onto logs and coconuts and floating around the ocean, and that's how Easter Island was populated. No, there were boats. There was, I'm talking about sailboat. I mean, real ocean-faring, ocean-going boats. And that's what happened at Easter Island. Could it have come out of Pakistan? The writing on the Rapa Nui, what is happening at Easter Island with that language that we don't understand, it's never been translated, but it looks very similar to what was in Pakistan. But that's 10,000 miles away. So how do we answer those questions? The same things with Easter Island. That's why we started off with Easter Island tonight. The same considerations that we have at Easter Island, that we have at Giza, that we have at Baalbek, that we have down in Peru, where these giant megalithic stones were moved and carved by civilizations that quite simply couldn't do it back then. And to do it today, we would have huge difficulties in trying to complete those tasks. And that's where we are today. We're starting to figure that out. It's not only shows like this, but it's researchers like Schock and Hancock and Paval. I keep pointing to those 3. There's a whole handful. I don't need to go down the entire list. But that we are starting to accept. We cannot believe what we have been told. I like this, Mark Tarana. He's reposted this again, Easter Island and Stonehenge with the head and the toes. That's actually pretty cool. I kind of dig that. I'm going to retweet it. I didn't do it earlier. That's a pretty good illustration. And the fact that it's actually lined up correctly, too. But that is the point that we are starting to understand more and more today, right? The more that we figure out and understand about the past, the more that we know that what is in the encyclopedias and what is being taught in universities and schools around the world is simply not true. There you go. Hawass is blowing a gasket. Yes, he is. All right. There you go. Thank you, Robert Schock. I needed that. I needed a really good dose of Gobekli Tepe. I wonder what happened in that king's chamber. Yeah, he's right. I want to go back and I didn't talk about this, but Napoleon was so moved when he came out that morning about what happened to him in the king's chamber. It changed him, and he never spoke about it. Never did. What is going on there? There has to be. There's got to be some type of electromagnetic resonance. The granite is alive, right? You have the weight. Now, just listen to me. You have the weight of the Great Pyramid above you, and that weight causes motion. It's a force, right? It's a force. It's a constant force that is coming down onto itself. It's got to be creating some type of energy in there. And I'm not talking about some new age woo-woo stuff. I'm talking about science, physics, electricity. And the force of these rocks, it's a constant pressure. That's energy, and it is being created. So laying in the king's chamber with the weight of the world above you, and the force coming down on all of those rocks and those carved stones so precisely fit together, there is something that is happening there. I can only imagine what goes on in your brain, the visions that you have, the thoughts that you have. If you do happen to sleep, the dreams that you would have, who is going to come there and visit with you and speak with you? What is it, how you view the world while you are in there? Think about that for a second, right? And I understand. I'm going to get it out of them one day, though. I promise. I got to go do it myself. Rita and I need to spend the night in the king's chamber. And you know what? We probably wouldn't talk about it either. Just to, because we could. All right. Right now, I've got to move on to something pretty important. Excuse me. The Bilderberg Group is meeting right now. Should have had Mark Dice on the show. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow. I'll give Mark a call. But the world's most powerful people are gathering for their annual meeting. And on the schedule, are you ready for this right now? On the schedule, and I've got a partial list here of things that are on the table, is Russia, the Trump administration, and the war on information. This is part of the topics. That's right. This year gathering is in Chantilly, Virginia. It's less than 30 miles from the White House. Now, isn't that interesting? And everything that is going on in the Oval Office right now is being discussed in Chantilly. I guarantee it. It's the top of the agenda. 131 people are getting together, and that have confirmed that they are attending. There are a few from the White House that are going to be there. It's a 4-day event, of course. And from the White House, we have the Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross. He's going to be there. National Security Advisor McMaster is going to be there. And Assistant to the President, Christopher Liddell, are all in attendance at the Bilderberg. Other topics that they have released for discussion include, now digest this, I'll break it down for you, include, and I'm quoting here, Russia in the international order. Now, that's a topic for discussion. Russia in the international order. What does that even mean? Now, I see that just order right there. There are visions of the cabal and the Illuminati and other things just by saying the word order. Are they talking about the order of power and influence? Are they talking about that? Has Russia been elevated? Has Russia been reduced in the order of things? Right? China and the Transatlantic Defense Alliance, and it's called Bullets, Bites, and Bucks. That is a topic for discussion. Now, we're talking about Europe's most influential, North America's most influential people are sitting around. They got papers in front of them, and they're looking at the topics that they're going to discuss. And right there is China, the Transatlantic Defense Alliance, Bullets, Bites, and Bucks. What is it that I mean, and you got to think about Henry Kissinger is going to be there. You have to think about how they are going to analyze this and break this down, and what is it that they need to get out of a discussion like that. Absolutely frightening. Another topic for discussion, and I can't make this stuff up. It's called, and I'm quoting, it's in quotes, the war on information. We're talking about the Bilderbergs. We are talking about bankers, finance, media, heads of state, heads of finance, the war machine, the military-industrial complex, all gathered, and they want to discuss the war on information. Now, I can't stress enough that the media, mass media, how it is dealt, how it is distributed, and what information is being distributed is dictated by just a handful of people. And that handful of people is gathering in Chantilly, Virginia. And part of their discussion over the next 4 days is the war on information. Next topic is the direction of the EU. Now, we have Brexit. We have other issues with other countries there, not only directly with the EU, but why would the European Union be discussed in that context? In other words, are they interested in breaking it up? Are they trying to keep it together? What is the advantage for the Bilderberg Group with the European Union? Certainly 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in the early 70s, when the euro was first discussed and the concept of EU was discussed, and you had NATO and you had the Cold War going on, right? The EU was a different thing. Today, it's not that kind of party. So what is in the best interest right now of the world and the Illuminati, the cabal, the Bilderberg Group with the European Union? Do they want to break it up? Think about that for a second. The direction of the EU. Very interesting. Some stuff is going to be happening here in the next couple of years. And when you think about the implications of Brexit and Fraxit, France maybe, or take it even a step further. What about Greece, right? What about Italy? What about Germany? The strongest country there, the one that is the most profitable at the moment is Germany. Does Merkel need the EU? Right on the, it's a crazy situation going on with the Bilderberg Group. Next on the agenda is, are you ready? Why, and this is in quotes, why is populism growing? Now, this obviously has to be a concern with the leaders of the dark world, the deep state, what is really going on. When we have the issue that is front and center for everybody, which is the petrodollar and the profits and how oil is bought and sold around the world, and how it props up every economy. Without oil, you don't have an infrastructure, and you have to purchase it. All of that profit, for every barrel that is sold, goes right into the United States. And if suddenly populism is growing and they need to address all of this on an economic level, they've got to curtail things right after with what went on, and it's so important here. The Arab Spring, right? What's going on in Europe right now? What's going on in Venezuela and other countries around the world? Certainly North and South Korea, right there. That populism and the very idea of that is exactly what they don't want, and they want to know, why is it growing? And if it continues, do we gain control? Us, our voice. Think about that that's exactly what they don't want. Very interesting to have that as I could see the bullet points underneath that and what they need to discuss. Does it get any darker than what I've just laid out for you? That's what goes on there. Now, this year's event is its 65th meeting, totally secret. It has met every year since 1954. Dennis Healy, Joseph Redinger, David Rockefeller, Prince Bernhard, the Netherlands were the group's founders. The Bilderbergs say that the conference is to foster dialogue between Europe and North America. I would say that, yes, I'm going to do that in just a second here. Oh, really? I don't know if we have enough time to do that, but I want to do that. I'm going to get to the end of this really quick. I've got to get to also Cicada 3301. Tomorrow is June 1st, falling on a Fader night, and some of the updates that have happened over in the last 24 hours. Our Twitter has been filled up. I'm waiting for a couple of things to take a turn here. So DeFango, if you're listening now, let's get you on the show tomorrow night. We'll do a full Cicada 3301 update. I'm very excited about what is going to be happening tomorrow in these PDFs that have been released. But we'll do that on tomorrow night's show. But the Bilderberg say that the conference is designed to foster dialogue between Europe and North America. I find that totally interesting. It's actually the entire world. Each year, it's attended by people from politics, industry, finance, media, academia. About 2/3 of the participants come from Europe and the rest from North America. Now, as well as some of Trump's top brass, other attendees this year include Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, Republican Senators Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham are in attendance, and Chinese Ambassador to the U.S., Cui Tiankai. Now, we have editors and chief commentators from several of publications, including Bloomberg, The Economist, of course, right? They're there. The Financial Times, The Wall Street Journal, Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera, and the London Evening Standard. They will all be in attendance, but it's notorious for the lack of information about what actually happens during the discussions that I've laid out for you. The meetings are completely closed to the public, of course, and to reporting journalists in general. They don't attend. All of the meetings are held under the Chatham House rule, which means that participants are free to use the information received, right? But neither the identity nor the affiliation of the speakers can be revealed. Also, no minutes, no notes, no reports are taken or written. Everything is memory. Now, nobody can buy their way into the meetings. Rather, everybody has to be invited. The invited guests are not allowed to bring any partners. You must attend alone. You're married, your wife stays at home. You're married, your husband stays at home if you are invited. The group never visits the same hotel or location twice. Past attendees include Henry Kissinger, who is going to attend again this year. Bill Gates, right? All the European royal families. Bill Clinton and Margaret Thatcher, of course, both attended before they rose to power. And, of course, you have Barack Obama. Now, I couldn't, who actually was chosen to be the next president in 2008, but couldn't find Trump's name on any past lists. I tried to find it. It doesn't exist. Did he ever attend a meeting in secret? I don't know. I could not find Trump's name anywhere, and I find that interesting. With that, that's going to wrap up the Shock and Awe special with Robert Schoch and Gobekli Tepe. Thank you, Robert. Great conversation tonight. Tomorrow night is another Fader night with John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom Live. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Camarion. Show is produced by Hill J. Paul, Mark D. Kovar, LJ3, Renee Jonas. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale. Webmaster is Drew, the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast is only copyrighted 2017 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, Fader night, Cicada 3301 update. It is June 1st, episode 667. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Until tomorrow night, everybody be safe. Go Beckley Tappy.